All right. Good evening, everyone. What's up, and welcome into Inside the Hoosier Mind post Super Bowl. And unfortunately for Jonathan, it has been a very long, rough week as unfortunately his 49ers fall to Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. Jonathan, I already know the answer to this question on how you're doing, but are you okay? Is that the biggest thing? Are you okay?
Al, it comes in waves, Tony. It comes in waves. There's times where it's like we'll be back. We got a good quarterback. And then there's times where I'm just like 16 seconds. 16 seconds and one defensive stop. That's all we needed.
That's it.
2 quarters in a row. Fourth quarter and overtime. We needed one stop. So right now I'm good.
Okay. Okay. So I do have to ask, and it'll kind of cover two topics in one. Well, it'll cover kind of the first topic, and then we'll move into it. Who do you really blame for the loss, though? Because obviously, a lot of people want to blame Shanahan because this is now his third Super Bowl he's lost, either as an offensive coordinator or as a head coach. They've all been by 10+ points or more.
Mhm.
Obviously, Steve Wilks got fired, so it seems as if he's firing him, even though from what I heard in the third quarter, because I didn't watch the third quarter. The first half to me was really boring. It was a defensive standstill basically, and then
Right.
the third quarter happened, and then I watched the fourth quarter because okay, now it became a whole lot more interesting. Steve Wilks gets fired when to me it's like if anybody needs to get fired, it's your special teams coordinator because of how your special teams played to really help set Kansas City up. Or is it to blame on Brock Purdy, even though Brock Purdy didn't really play bad? I mean, he got him to within 3. You can't really ask much more than that. But to you, who do you think should shoulder the blame more than anything?
So to prep for this and to really kind of explain to myself how this happened, I watched the Super Bowl 2 times. I
Oh
watched the
wow,
Super Bowl
okay.
2 times. The first time, obviously, was the emotional time.
Right.
The second time, I actually looked back to count how many holding calls went
Was
uncalled.
missed. Yes.
There were a lot. I have them documented.
Mm-hmm.
But about halfway through the third quarter, one thing
Uh-oh. I think I've lost Jonathan for a minute. Hopefully we'll get him back. But I will agree. So with Kansas City, and it was funny that they actually pointed this out on TikTok that I saw. There was a lot of missed holding calls by the Chiefs. The Chiefs were actually one of the most penalized teams coming into this game with the most holding calls, and then actually ended up not getting a single holding call in the Super Bowl whatsoever, which to me is probably the most surprising thing. And I know a lot of people have made the comments, and even I've said it before over probably the last, I would say, 4 or 5 years. Officiating in the NFL has just gotten worse and worse and worse, with absolutely no hope of the officiating getting better. And that's not just in the Super Bowl, it's not just with the Chiefs, but it always seems as if the teams that are in kind of that dynasty mode, the Patriots and Tom Brady used to get a lot of BS calls that would go their way. The Chiefs obviously didn't get a lot of calls against them, uh, both in the Ravens game as well as the 49ers game. But luckily, Jonathan got his audio back. So you were talking about how you did record all of the holding penalties that were not called on Kansas City.
Well, I actually have Sunday ticket because I live in Tampa, so I don't get to go to the 49ers games as often as I would like to.
Right.
But I rewatched the game after a day, and about halfway through the third quarter, one thing became abundantly clear. The 49ers had every single opportunity to win that game, and they did not.
Mm-hmm.
They had every opportunity. Patrick Mahomes scored 19 points.
Yep.
And I truly believe that if two things happened that I think switched the game. Dre Greenlaw got hurt running onto the field.
Celebrating in
I,
probably the most freak accident way you could ever have it happen.
I like what are you supposed to do
Yeah.
about that? How do you even prepare the team against that?
Right.
So he got hurt running onto. He didn't trip over anybody.
Nope.
He planted his foot to run back on the field, and up until that point, he had been a monster on
Mhm.
defense. He is plugging up all the runs. And then we had the muffed punt. And
Mhm.
the muffed punt is like, this is a bad punt. It was not a good punt at all. And
Yeah.
it just happens to fall into a group of people and it bounces off of one of our players. That's when the game switched. Up until that point, the Niners were dominating.
Mhm.
Even post Christian McCaffrey fumble, which doesn't happen, post Brock Purdy 3s and outs in the third quarter coming out. And so I'm watching this third quarter, and after this muff punt, I'm just like, we've had every single opportunity. Yes, they
Mhm.
missed a lot of holding calls in critical moments. They didn't call them. But then we get to the fourth quarter, third and what, third and four,
Mhm.
and we have a free runner coming through. Brock Purdy has no chance. Ball gets tipped, incomplete pass. You settle for a field goal. Again, in the red zone. I believe this is overtime now, or it might have been the fourth quarter. Brock Purdy calls the play. Two of our receivers win their routes. One of them falls. Brandon Ayuk is wide open in the end zone. Jawan Jennings beats his man on the little the in and out route.
Mhm.
There's 2 touchdowns. But because the offensive line allowed Chris Jones to come free, Brock Purdy has to get rid of it early. If he
Yep.
has another half second, he's finding one of the 2 guys. It's a touchdown.
Yeah.
So, who should shoulder the blame? Special teams, I think, was the reason that we lost that game. Besides the muff punt, we had a blocked extra point. You make
Mhm.
that extra point, we don't even go into overtime. You're winning the game.
Very true.
Um, that's, and then honestly, I have to say the defense.
Okay.
The defense and the special teams lost that game because Kansas City has a great defense. And the
Mhm.
49ers were pushing them around on offense. They were
Yep.
pushing them around.
Mhm.
7, 8, 9 chunks. Brandon Ayuk's Brock. I have a bold prediction for later on in this topic about Brock Purdy that I
Okay.
want you to hear. A really bold prediction that I don't think a lot of people see yet.
Okay.
But Brock Purdy is carving up this zone. He's carving them up. He's getting 20-yard gains with Ayuk and Jennings, and like Kittle had one that was called back for a hold. Like, he is carving up this defense.
Yeah.
And because our defense can't get a stop, we're out.
Mhm.
So that's when I watched the game through the second time and removed my emotions from it. The special
Right.
teams cost us the game. The defense cost us the game,
Okay.
despite the holding calls.
Okay. So I do have to ask, and not saying that you're going to put it all on Shanahan, but I do have to ask, what did you think of his offensive game plan? Because obviously the Chiefs have a really good defense. They were going to have to prepare a lot. They weren't going to be able to just get a lot of the free plays out of a lot of their big weapons. But Christian McCaffrey was obviously the most dominant player on the team, other than Brock Purdy when it comes to the offense. He had 22 carries, 80 yards. He only averaged about 3.6 yards a carry, but he's also the biggest receiver too. He had 8 receptions for 80 yards, his longest going for 24. He did have a receiving touchdown, and unfortunately, he had the fumble as well to kind of start out the first quarter. But
That was
for
the
IU,
first drive, I believe. That was the very
I
first drive of the game.
yeah, I think so because they were moving down pretty easily. I thought,
Um,
okay, this is going to be a 49ers potential blowout of Kansas City. But the thing that probably surprises me the most is, Ayuk had 3 receptions off of 6 targets for 49 yards. Not terrible, but I think a lot of people, myself included, kind of expected better from him. Now, albeit again, we did say that the Chiefs have a really good defense. Debo, 3 receptions, 33 yards on 11 targets. He was probably targeted the most. And then Juwan Jennings, also not bad. Four receptions, 42 receiving yards. Now, I will say, Juwan Jennings was the best 49ers quarterback in that game. only going,
I
only going
absolutely disagree, but okay.
He went 1 for 1, 21 yards and a touchdown.
Yeah, he had a
Quarterback
perfect
rating
passer
wise,
rating.
he did. He had a perfect passer rating. But I do kind of wonder with some of Kyle's game planning because it seemed as if he moved away from CMC a little bit more in the second half than what he did in the first. At least that's kind of my initial impression. I know obviously at the end when you were watching that last drive, Kansas City's defense was exhausted. And for whatever
Mhm.
reason, Christian McCaffrey's like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna run right up in the middle into Chris Jones' arms. I'm like, wait a minute. Just run. Like you got the speed. Like you're an elusive running back more than anything. You can get to the outside. Why are you
Mhm.
trying to run up the middle against Chris Jones of all people?
Well, the game plan that Kyle Shanahan gave the team the lead 3 different times
Yeah.
late in the game. 3
Mm-hmm.
different times. And I know that everybody likes to say you need touchdowns to beat Mahomes. You need touchdowns. You need touchdowns. Not necessarily. You just need more
No.
points than he has. You
Mm-hmm.
need defensive stops. You need the defense to step up. You need to
Yeah.
pressure him. And it'd be nice to get some consistency on the holds at least, but that's neither here nor there.
Right.
You just need more points than him. And we
Mm-hmm.
like to listen to sports media and glorify getting touchdowns like it's easy in the Super Bowl, and it never has been. Touchdowns
No.
are hard to come by in the Super Bowl. Mahomes only had one. He had 1 touchdown until overtime.
Yep.
Like
Yeah. One touchdown and one pick.
this is the greatest quarterback arguably ever, right? 1 touchdown, 1 pick until overtime.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're turning around and expecting not the second greatest coach and a quarterback on his second year
Mm-hmm.
to be better than Mahomes and criticize them when they come up 3 points short. Like what
Right.
what what else do you want them to do? Like this
Right.
is not an easy game. Every game you're not going to beat teams by 30 points. So I
No.
think we criticize Kyle Shanahan's game plan a little bit too much. Christian McCaffrey is a tank, yes, but he's also human. He
Yes.
fumbles the ball. He gets
Mm-hmm.
exhausted. Just like everybody else. He can't
Yeah.
just feed Christian McCaffrey 40 times against that defense, especially if the O line is going to play like they played. But the one drive that I was a little bit concerned right after the interception, we came out and did not run the ball
Mm-hmm.
for that drive.
Right.
That was when I got a little bit concerned
Mm-hmm.
because Debo. I actually watched a YouTube channel called QB School. I don't know if
Okay.
you've heard of it,
Mm-hmm.
but in the Super Bowl game, he's highlighting Debo Samuel. Debo's not winning on many of his routes.
Yeah.
He is sticky in the second half in particular. He is not
Mm-hmm.
winning on many of his routes.
Yeah.
And Ayuk is coming open late on some of these routes, and Brock Purdy just doesn't have that kind of time. And
Mm-hmm.
so uh, I think Kyle, his game plan would have won the game if not for the defense, if
Okay.
not for the special teams blunders, if not for Greenlaw having an Achilles injury, just running onto the field so that he can make another play. I think
Yeah.
if those factors don't happen, the 49ers win that game. So
Okay.
Kyle Shanahan's game plan was better than Andy Reid's game plan, even though he lost. He just got Mahomes. And He's been doing that to everybody. So I don't think Shanahan's game plan was in question there. Nor do I put this loss on Kyle Shanahan. Like last week, we like to compound losses onto a guy who has done everything right to get to the big game and win the big game if the defense makes a stop.
Yeah. Well, that actually leads in my other question is, so do you think Steve Wilks deserved to be fired as a result of that? Because if we look at the whole season, the 49ers defense was 8th in the league overall. So they were 8th in yards per game, they were 3rd in rushing yards per game, they were 14th in passing yards, they were 3rd in points per game as far as their defense goes. So they had basically a top 10 defense throughout the entirety of the season. Now, they did let Green Bay score 21 points, which isn't necessarily bad. It's not great, but it's not bad. They only were able to score 3 touchdowns. They were able to. Now, Detroit was a little bit of an uglier game. However, when you look at the actual box score, yes, they allowed Detroit to score 24 points in the first half. However, they only let them score 7 in the second half. So they tightened up pretty well. And then with the exception of the last touchdown to end overtime, they only let Kansas City score 25. So I mean, overall, this defense did really well throughout the entirety of the year. The only game really in the regular season that they allowed not really an egregious amount of points, but something kind of crazy is they let Arizona put 29 on them kind of towards the end of the season after San Francisco all but knew they were going to be in the playoffs. So you can kind of get through that last stretch. It's not really going to matter as much. But do you think he deserved to be fired for that, though?
I don't like to say anybody deserves to be fired, especially in a job where there's 32 of them. Like there's 32 defensive coordinator jobs in the NFL. There's not a lot of jobs in the
Right.
NFL. So he's obviously great at what he does. For this particular team, the way that the scheme has been working, the story of the 49ers defense the entire season was see what the offense on the other side does in the first half, adjust for it in the second half. It's a very reactionary way of playing defense. You're waiting to see what they do and you adjust accordingly versus dictating your side of the ball, which for the past 2 defensive coordinators, that was what was happening. Specifically, the Robert Saleh led 49ers defense, you could not run at all in any half. You could not run in any half. They had to have defensive starters out before anybody was even able to run. And DeMeco Ryans did a very similar thing with his defense. It wasn't wait until the second half and then bend but don't break. It was we're breaking you in the first half so we don't have to come out here in the second half if we don't want to. That was the 49ers game plan. If not for Brock Purdy getting injured in the Eagles game, I think the Niners would be back-to-back Super Bowls, which is really hard to do in the NFL, let alone win one. It's really hard to go to 4 of the last 5 NFC Championship games.
Yeah.
So, and then with this year's defense, the passing defense did get better, but the running defense, the rushing defense got worse, which that is not the trend that you want, because a lot of times in this league, you run to open up the pass, unless you have a Josh Allen or a Patrick Mahomes in particular.
Or Lamar, who all
or
3,
Lamar.
will scramble. And so then it's kind of hard for you to try to cover the pass or defend the run because either quarterback can really pretty much do anything they want to do at that point.
And it's those 3 quarterbacks, really, and that's it, who are going to give the Niners trouble. Every other time the Niners struggled, the defense didn't show up.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'm not surprised with this move. I think in the long run, it will help San Francisco be better in the long run. I truly believe the Niners are going to make another deep playoff run, depending on who they keep and bring back, because the core of this team is really, really good. And this quarterback is a star. This is a star quarterback that people just, because he's Mr. Irrelevant, they don't know it yet. I guess now is as good a time as ever for the bold prediction. I truly believe there was a moment in the Super Bowl where Brock Purdy read the Kansas City defense. He read a Super Bowl defense, made a change, and it resulted in like an 8-yard gain, which doesn't seem like a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, oh, Christian McCaffrey made an 8-yard run. But that moment for a second-year quarterback to dissect a Super Bowl defense like that showed me exactly how smart this quarterback is. I think he's going to be a feared quarterback, meaning defensive coordinators are going to be up at night wondering how they're going to play this quarterback by the middle of next season. This season, yes, it was about Debo and Christian and if Trent's playing, blah, blah, blah. Next season, I do not think that will be the case. His elbow is completely healed. Now he's just able to pick apart these defenses. And every time they switched to his zone, Brock Purdy dissected them a la Drew Brees. And he's already drawing those comparisons now. I think by the middle of next season, we're going to say, oh, this is the best quarterback in the NFC at the very least. But yeah, I hate to say somebody deserved to get fired, but it was not a surprise that Wilks got fired because the way that the defense had been playing all season was, okay, what are you doing in the first half? All right, now we're going to adjust in the second half. And that's just not the Niners brand of football.
Okay. Well, I will say it does show for Brock Purdy that he is growing, that he is learning as a quarterback, and I think it helps when you have a Kyle Shanahan to probably help you
absolutely
look at some of these schemes, break them down and whatnot, that he's able to grow. And even for people who, if they like or dislike Brock Purdy, he is still just a second-year quarterback. He is going to have to learn. He's going to have to figure out a lot of these schemes. Now, I will say you did bring up an interesting point that I wanted to throw in there of if San Francisco brings a lot of the core people back. Two of the names that I heard, and I will say as somebody who I don't watch a lot of 49ers games, but the little bit that I do, as well as, hearing the news, seeing the injury report, stuff like that, there's two of your really big players that when they're healthy, they're two of the best at their positions. However, usually when they're out for pretty significant amounts of time, and it's hard for them to kind of get back in their groove. So my biggest question is, so obviously Ayuk is coming up on a potential extension. I think they have this one last year. They can pay him. They're going to pay him $14 million to play. Then they can potentially franchise tag him 2 more times, or they can sign him to a lucrative contract, whatever they decide to do. The two big names that I heard, though, was Deebo Samuel and George Kittle. Again, both great at what they do when healthy. We kind of saw with Deebo against not only the Packers. I'm not sure if it was against the Lions. I didn't get to catch as much of that game. He was kind of in and out. He had been in and out coming into that game throughout the regular season, kind of the same with George. For you as a Niners fan, do you think that you potentially trade them to at least get some type of a draft capital back on them? Because again, it's not that you guys are trading them because they're not any good. It's just, unfortunately, they have an injury history, and you guys are eventually going to come to that point where you're going to have to pay Brock. You're going to have to pay Ayuk. You're going to have to pay a lot of these guys because you've done so well in the draft, and these guys are all studs, and a lot of them are top at their position. You guys just physically can't afford to pay everybody.
Sounds like a next year problem.
Next year problem?
Seriously, like Ayuk is coming. He's on a 5th year right now. He's on his final year of that contract. Deebo and Kittle, I think, are both on their final year next year. I think I'm not sure. Handle it then.
Okay.
Don't make any rash decisions now to try and make up for, like, unless they're gonna trade like a Sam Laporta or something, which I don't see happening. Like, that's the only you trade Kittle for a Sam Laporta only because he's younger, or that's it. You run it back with Kittle. Like, who are you going to get that's better than George Kittle at that position?
Right.
And the same with Deebo. Like, who else is going to come in and do what Deebo does?
True. Now, I would make the counter argument, though. That's kind of the beauty with the draft, and we can all admit that John Lynch has been great at drafting pretty much everybody throughout every single round offensively and defensively, you can always find a wide receiver to make it work. You can always find a tight end to make it work. So I mean that could be a potential option that you do. You maybe trade George Kittle for what, a second or a third, maybe a first for Debo. Like, could
Sounds
potentially
like the
happen.
next year problem.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. But so we'll move on from the Super Bowl, because obviously it does suck for a lot of 49ers fans. I can say that, being a former Cowboys fan, for a lot of, especially for a lot of the newer generation 49ers fans. They didn't get to grow up in the 80s. They didn't get to see the success,
Right.
just like a lot of newer Cowboys fans, myself, formerly included, didn't really get to see a lot of the 90s and see Dallas in its heyday. For you guys, you've been to, 3 Super Bowls, unfortunately lost all 3, and Dallas hasn't even sniffed it. So for those 2 franchises, it's especially painful. I have a buddy in a group chat that is a 49ers fan. He's like, man, I don't know if I can do football. He's like, at least right now, like a week after, he goes, I don't think I can do football right now. He's like, I think I got to quit for a while. He's like,
Yeah,
but I say that until next year. And he goes, then I'm going to get my hopes up again.
this one was tough. I think the Niners fans in general saw the Jimmy G Super Bowl, and we thought we could win despite Jimmy G, because
Right.
Jimmy G was good for a couple of turnovers. With Brock, and we were shown to be right. We thought we could win with Brock because he's so good. Like, Niners fans, the guy led the league in a lot of quarterback metrics, and we haven't had a quarterback do that for a long time. And we're talking leading the league against guys like Mahomes and Allen and Lamar and some of the greats that we've ever seen. But to watch this one go down to the last second, this one was tough.
No one heard, I bet. But let's move on to the next topic, because this one to me is probably one of the most interesting, because obviously we've talked about this the last few shows, especially with the new draft order being confirmed. The Bears are technically on the clock with the first overall pick, barring a major trade happening between now and draft night. With that, there have obviously been a lot of trade rumors been swirling, because it's now officially the full entire offseason for the NFL. So all the retirements, the drama, the firings, the hirings, whatnot are going to come into play.
Buckle up.
Exactly, which that's probably one of my favorite parts, is more like March timeframe, when they officially open up free agency for guys to go sign with other teams. You potentially have sign and trades with people, with guys to be in new uniforms and whatnot. The biggest one is Justin Fields. So there have been three big teams that I could kind of see him being traded to, if he gets traded, that kind of makes sense, or at least the head coaches really like them. Is Justin Fields is potentially going to Pittsburgh, has been probably the biggest one that I've heard his name being linked to. Mike Tomlin's a big fan of Justin. Art Smith was a big fan of him when he was the head coach in Atlanta. He's now the offensive coordinator for Pittsburgh. So that's a potential destination, because I don't think they're sold on Kenny Pickett, as well as him having injury history. I think the Pittsburgh O-line isn't that great as what we're probably used to seeing out of Pittsburgh. And those wide receivers, I don't think those wide receivers live up to expectations. And that's no slight to like George Pickens. And in their defense, they really didn't have an offensive coordinator in Matt Canada for the longest time. But even then, it's one of those, I would almost make the argument, just like a quarterback, you can improvise, make your own play, and still show you can be great despite a bad play caller. So I don't know if I would see Justin coming in there and necessarily fixing that or making that better. And much to Colin Cowherd brought this up, why would Justin want to go from one very defense-heavy, defense-driven franchise in the Bears to another very defense-heavy, defense-focused, and defensive coach, team in the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Well, because that's the only way he's going to succeed in this league. That's why. Justin Fields is what everybody thought Brock Purdy was this year, a guy carried by his team. Look at his record. Look at his record in one of the weakest divisions in football. You've got the Packers, the Bears, the Vikings
Lions
and the
and the
Lions.
Yep.
Besides the Lions, who else scares you? Honestly, in that division, and he is what is it? 15-30 or something like that. He can't 15-30.
Mm-hmm. Well,
And we're saying he's going to go to Pittsburgh, which is probably the toughest division in football. You got Lamar in there twice. Deshaun Watson's coming back. You've got Joe Burrow in that. Seriously?
So here's where I'll defend Justin a little bit, because I like Justin. I watched him a lot at Ohio State. I even watched him at Georgia. I was a pretty big Justin fan. You got to remember, he went to Chicago. And prior to, we'd probably say this year, it's going to be one of the weakest divisions in the NFL. For the longest time, throughout most of Justin's career, you've had Aaron Rodgers as your starting quarterback in Green Bay. You've had a Minnesota Vikings team, albeit led by Kirk Cousins, has pretty much been pretty heavy playoff contenders for the last few years that Justin has been in there. And then the Lions, of course, have been the Lions. They've been up and down, Dan Campbell and whatnot, just throwing stuff in there to purely, cause chaos because it's the Lions and that's what they do. He hasn't been in a super easy division. Now, I think if he stays this year, they have a better chance. Now, albeit, like I've made the argument for Justin before, the Bears O-line has been crap for years. They haven't had a really good O-line since Jay Cutler was the quarterback and he had Alshon Jeffrey and Brandon Marshall on either side with Martellus Bennett at the tight end. That's the last really good offensive line the Bears have had at any point. He hasn't had that. On top of that, he doesn't really get a number one wide receiver until this year with DJ Moore. Up into that, he's had Darnell Mooney.
Who is actually really good.
I would say he's another one of those. He reminds me a lot of like Michael Pittman Jr. He's a solid number. He's a solid number
really
two.
Solid.
He's a solid number two, but I do think you need a true big number one guy, which to me, if I'm the Bears, I trade with either Washington or I trade with New England, move back just a couple spots, because those two teams are grabbing a quarterback no matter what. They have to grab a quarterback because New England already said they're going to trade Mac. Washington doesn't have anybody. They've got to get a quarterback. If you're sitting there at 2 or 3, you can get Marvin Harrison Jr. Then you got DJ. Then you got Marvin Harrison. They hold the 8th overall pick, their own, which they could either go and get the wide receiver out of Washington, Rome Duzane, I think his name is. He's like 6'4" out of Washington, or you can go get you a top 10 offensive lineman that you also need at that position. Either one.
Tony, he's 15-30.
But who has he had as a team though? Like let's be honest. Like, as much as I love the Bears, when have we ever sat here and say, man, the Bears are just a quarterback away? Like, they got everything attractive and sexy someone needs to succeed up in Chicago.
The quarterback before Justin Fields was who?
Quarterback before Justin Fields was technically Andy Dalton until he got hurt, and then Justin came in and took over.
Mitch Trubisky was the quarterback, wasn't he?
The actual full-time starter, yes, it was Mitch.
Didn't he make the playoffs?
Twice with an offensive coach in Matt Nagy.
I'm just saying, 15-30.
But let's be realistic,
and the guy
too.
behind you was not nearly as gifted when it comes to a runner. The thing about Justin Fields that nobody wants to admit is he's not a good quarterback. He is not Lamar Jackson, who also is not a good quarterback. They're electric. They're fun to watch. It's great to have in fantasy football. They're like a Madden game, but they're not good quarterbacks. And this year was the ultimate indictment on Justin Fields because of another Ohio State guy named CJ Stroud. He came into the league, and he's a quarterback. We saw it all year at Ohio State. He was a good quarterback. He comes into the league, and he's throwing to guys we don't even know is on their roster besides Robert Woods. He's the only guy we recognize, and he took that team to the playoffs. A defensive-minded coach, by the way.
Yeah.
took them to the playoffs and into they beat the number one defense in the league.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, don't outthink the room here. Do not outthink the room here. We love Justin Fields as a person. He's a great person, has more opportunities to do things for the community than most people do, but he's not a good quarterback. I'm sorry. So
Okay.
it's not going to matter where he goes. At this point, at 50 games into the league, I think we know a guy.
Okay.
That's a pretty good sample size to say if somebody's good or not. And the only flashes that we've seen with Justin Fields has been when he runs the ball. He's not a good quarterback. His very first preseason game against second and third string guys that won't even be in the league. He couldn't even read an obvious blitz coming off of the edge. Obvious. And got smacked dead in the grill. At this point in the NFL, you should be able to slide the protection over and recognize an obvious blitz. You and I can play Madden football, and we see a guy creeping up on the side, and we're going to send the running back over to pass protect in Madden.
Right.
We haven't been playing football all our lives, and he couldn't do it then. It's the same deal with like Trey Lance. We keep saying Trey Lance has a high ceiling. No, he doesn't. If you can't make Kyle Shanahan's system work for you, which is the most quarterback-friendly system in the league, if you can't make that work for you, you don't got it. And it's say he doesn't have it. It's okay.
See, now that was my big thing when the 49ers drafted him third overall. I was so confused because you look at him, I'm like, wait a minute. He played at North Dakota State. He played like 1 year and then COVID happened. And that's all the film that they had on him. They barely had any film. And yeah, I'm like, okay, he's got potential. He's a raw athlete. He can throw the ball. I'm like, okay, he's with Kyle Shanahan. Maybe they can develop him into something. He sits behind Jimmy G. Like, okay, maybe Kyle's got something cooking in there. And then, yeah, I remember I watched him this past season, right before they traded him. I watched him against the Raiders in the preseason, and I'm like, this guy is not the guy. He's not the guy.
And to the Niners' credit, they recognized that and moved off of him.
Yeah. Now, I will say that is probably one of the most impressive things that I've seen the Niners do, mainly because how many other teams do you think, if they gave up 3 first-round picks to move up to third overall to draft a guy and they move on from him before his rookie contract is even over, how many of them would get just absolutely destroyed because
the
you
Niners
did that?
The Niners did get destroyed because they did that. Mr. Irrelevant, you're going to do, and then watch what happened. And he came into the league, and Kyle developed him, and Kyle opened up the entire playbook once it was proven that Brock was the dude, that Brock is him. That's what Kyle was looking for. You look at all of Kyle's teams where he's been the most successful.
Mm-hmm.
He has never had a quarterback that runs the ball on purpose because it doesn't work. Think of all the quarterbacks when Kyle was looking for a replacement for Jimmy G potentially. It was Kirk Cousins. It was Mac Jones.
Yep.
It was these guys who are passers. Tom Brady was another one. Guys who dissect defenses and they can scramble for a couple of yards, but that is not their bread and butter, is the scramble game. This is why Lamar Jackson will never win a Super Bowl. Those guys don't win the Super Bowl. These running quarterbacks never have won a Super Bowl in the history of the NFL. It's been quarterbacks who can dissect defenses, and if they have to scramble, they will.
Yeah. Well,
Justin Fields is the opposite. He is a guy who is scramble first, and if you drop back in coverage and you make him throw the ball, he throws interceptions, which is why he's 15-30 in the NFL. I would trade him in Madden. I would trade a guy like that in Madden if I was running a team. And we just keep, if we get him with the right guy, no. At some point, we have to admit he doesn't have it.
Well, so here's what I was getting ready to ask next with that is, so the other two teams that I feel would make him better One in particular, probably more than the other, is the other one is Atlanta, because obviously he's from Georgia. He has ties to Atlanta. He would be paired up with, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, pretty decent O line, pretty okay defense that's kind of aging. The other
Okay.
one, and John Suggs pointed this out, is the Seahawks. He could sit behind Geno, kind of learn from Geno. He has a pretty good
Guys,
offense, and he has the former Ravens defensive coordinator, who, if there's anybody who could kind of, I guess, teach him or say, hey, this is who you need to try to emulate as far as if you're going to use your legs a lot, is Lamar. And Seattle also has better weapons in DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, better
look,
O line, and better
this is
defense.
this is what Justin Fields needs to do. As long as people keep trying to tell themselves that he is a starter, he's going to fail. Okay, he is not a starting quarterback in the NFL. He could be a starting wide receiver. He could be a starting running back, maybe a gadget guy, Cordero Patterson type of guy. He's shown
Like
that
a
type of skill.
like a
But
Taysom Hill
guy,
character almost.
that would be a perfect role for him. That would be a perfect role for him. You come in, we have this little gadget play, we want you to run it. That would be a perfect role for him.
So,
He is a backup. This
so I
is
got
a
to
guy
ask.
you put in for 3 games. He would be a good backup for Lamar. He'd be a good backup for a Jalen Hurts in that system. That's it. I'm trying to think of another power running quarterback in the league. I can't think of any other one.
So
Maybe
here's
Kyler Murray, maybe but Kyler's a
man.
good passer. That's it. He's a backup.
So you think, and again, this is kind of in support of him, but also a dismiss on Atlanta. You don't think he would be a, I'm not going to say he's a massive upgrade, but you don't think he's a better upgrade than Desmond Ritter and Taylor Heineke in Atlanta if he goes and
I,
becomes the quarterback there?
I mean, do I think he's a better back? Honestly, I don't think so.
You don't
Taylor
think he's
Heineke has at least shown flashes that he can win the game as a passer. He's brought a Washington team up and at least won some big games. Justin Fields never has. He's 15-30.
But you got to remember what Washington had on that defense, because you got one of their defensive players who played pretty damn well in the Super Bowl too, and Chase Young. He had
Mm-hmm.
Montez Sweat on the other side. You've got Deron Payne. You've got Jonathan Allen in the middle. So their front four on paper and when healthy was one of the scariest in the league if they could put it all together.
Didn't the Bears have Roquan Smith at one point? And didn't the Bears have they traded Khalil? Is it Khalil Mack was with the Bears and then got traded over?
Yeah.
Tony, come on, man. This, what
But
else do you want?
But they didn't have, to Washington's credit, they didn't have a Terry McLaurin like Taylor Heineke has had. And we can't deny it, Terry McLaurin is a top 10 wide
He's a
receiver,
stud.
hands down. Justin didn't get that until this year with DJ. Because, I
And
mean,
what happened?
before then, his best wide receiver was who? Allen Robinson, who has since faded into non-existence.
Didn't he win a Super Bowl with the Rams?
Yes, on paper, but did he actually contribute to them winning?
Yeah, he was the deep threat. He wasn't. He kind of faded later in the season.
Yeah,
but
because
they have
there
Cooper
was
Kupp.
OBJ and Cooper Kupp.
Right. So you don't really need him to be featured. Allen Robinson was a good receiver. He was a top 5 receiver with Justin Fields. That's a good receiver. This year, how many wins did the Bears have? Wasn't it 4?
7. They had 7.
7?
Yep. I mean, it was better than honestly what a lot of people thought they would finish at.
That's half of his career wins he got this year. Half of his career wins he got this year.
But like I said, he's only primarily had defensive coaches, or Matt Nagy, who, again, let's be honest, where has Matt Nagy got most of his success from? Riding Patrick Mahomes and Kansas City's coattails.
But he did make the playoffs. And if
with
not
Mitch
for
Trubisky.
a field goal double doink, that's a divisional round at least.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, and I know that there's a whole race issue coming into this, and I know that Justin Fields is electric when it comes to running the ball. He's not a good quarterback. He's not. And the sooner that we accept this, the sooner the Bears accept this, the sooner the Seahawks accept this, and the NFL at large, they just accept 15-30 is never good enough in any level of any sport to be considered a starter on that level. I don't care where you go. It could be college. If your record is 15-30 as a career person, you're not good enough to do it. That's not good enough.
Okay.
He'd be a great backup for Lamar. That would be a perfect situation for him. Jalen Hurts, perfect situation for him. Great backup, because if Lamar gets hurt, which he's prone to do, you at least have a quarterback who can emulate his style of play, at least. Jalen Hurts, same thing. These are two guys who are not good quarterbacks. Their focus is on their run. Like Lamar, every time Lamar tries to be a passer, it just looks weird, doesn't it? Like, it's always his best plays as a passer are always some broken defense plays where a receiver's running wide open. He doesn't dissect defenses or read defenses. He comes back, the line opens up, everybody's covered downfield, and he runs. That's not a quarterback. Not in the NFL.
I mean, I get it. And I do think if he was to become a backup and learn, Lamar would probably be the best. And John commented,
perfect scenario for him.
John commented, just accept 99% of Ohio State quarterbacks don't make it in the NFL. Stroud is going to be the 1%. Here's my biggest argument to that.
He might not even make it.
Here's my biggest argument to that, because I hear that all the time, especially with people who hate Ohio State, which I get that. I would argue there's another university that's in the exact same position, and that's Alabama, because Mac Jones not going to make it past his rookie deal. Tua is a big question mark. Will they not?
Good quarterback.
We don't know what's going to happen with that. Now, technically, Jalen Hurts did go to Alabama. He learned from Lincoln Riley and Oklahoma, but yeah, now he's the only one so far, at least here recently, that has been a starter that's made it past his rookie deal. The only other one that I know of off the top of my head that went to Alabama and made it past their rookie deal but isn't a starter was A.J. McCarron, who was a career backup to Andy Flippin Dalton in Cincinnati. Like,
Jalen Hurts has had one good season. One.
I would argue he's had two, not including this past season. He's had two. He's had the one where he was the first full-time starter. They went like 10-7. They lost to Tom Brady in the wild card.
And got blown out by Tom Brady.
Yes, I don't deny that at all.
And it was ugly. He played awful that game.
He kind of comes back the following year. They obviously go to the Super Bowl, lose to the Chiefs. Now this year, this year was definitely a step back for him. No doubt.
He's had one good season.
But to me, the thing I argue the most about with a lot of these college quarterbacks, with Alabama, with Ohio State, we're kind of seeing it with Joe Burrow a little bit in Cincinnati, but he's had a couple good seasons and is, I would still consider, a top quarterback. All of these quarterbacks that come from these big Power 5 schools that you have literally first-round talent surrounding you at every single position. You look at Mac Jones and that Alabama roster. You had Jerry Jeudy, you had Henry Ruggs, you had Devontae Smith, there was another big Alabama wide receiver, there was, I think Devontae Smith was technically like the fourth guy on the list as far as the Alabama Jameson Williamson. Like, they had 4 first-round wide receivers on their depth chart. You had Najee Harris as your running back. You had a top star-studded defense with Patrick Surtain and Trayvon Diggs. Like, you and I could go play quarterback for the University of Alabama at that point. We're probably going to get you real damn close to the natty.
Don't throw me in that. No.
No. And
That's
you look at all
than we make it seem, but I get what you're saying. You're absolutely right. Is the powerhouses of the SEC and the Big Ten in particular, those two conferences in particular, the powerhouses have the NFL guys. And whether they just develop them or recruit them coming out of high school, whatever they do, they're doing something right, because they always end up with all the NFL guys. Yep. Joe Burrow is the exception.
Yep.
Joe Burrow is actually, but when you look over Joe Burrow's career, though, he had to earn his right to play quarterback.
Yes, he did.
I believe he was at Ohio State, and because they had Justin Fields and somebody else, he was like third on the depth chart. So he transferred out and he
Oh,
played
yeah.
at LSU. If you remember, before those national championship teams, he was getting beat up a lot
Yep.
behind not great O lines and not great defenses until they got, I think it was Jamar Chase that
Yeah,
year when he
from
had Jamar Chase.
the following year. Yep.
Joe Burrow had to earn his. He had to transfer out and work his way up. And so when Joe Burrows is legit, and then he goes to the worst organization in football and takes them to the Super Bowl
Super
within
Bowl.
3 years coming off of an injury.
Yep.
People forget that he had a really horrendous
He had
injury,
a season-ending injury.
like his knee went like this. Like his. That's why I kind of see him and Brock Purdy with the same trajectory. Because even though Brock's situation was way better than Joe's situation, both of them are coming off of career-ending, potentially, injuries, and they come back and they lead the team to the Super Bowl. Like, that is hard to do. They've had to earn their stripes, so to speak. Justin Fields never had to earn his stripes. Jalen Hurts never had to earn his stripes. He went from Alabama to Oklahoma and did most of his damage on the ground. Again, what other quarterback needs to squat 600 pounds?
None. And John also brought up the other two that Mac Jones had. He had Jalen Waddle and he had John Mechie. Like, you had 6 first-round wide receivers. No wonder Mac Jones looks so good.
Just throwing it up, and the guys were just going and getting it because you got a track team on your squad. Like, this is – we've seen it enough times. I think this is why people are boosting C.J. Stroud up as much as they are, because he was a rookie. He was a rookie. He did not go as far as Brock Purdy his first season. He didn't even go that far. But he played Lamar. But now everybody's got tape on him. I think we should give guys 3 years.
That's what I always do.
2 years.
I give him 3, and here's why I give him 3. Kind of the same thing with Jalen. Rookie year, you're kind of learning. Nobody really has a lot of tape on you. They don't know what you're going to do when you come in the NFL. Second year, you may have a little bit of, regress because, okay, guys have figured you out now.
Right.
The third year to me is really when, okay, what have you learned from the sophomore year? Are you going to continue to slump? Have you improved? If so, what have you improved on? Like, I give them 3. If you don't show any improvement after year 3, again, to me, a lot of it depends on where you go, kind of situation.
Sure.
Like, just think about for the longest time when you used to go to Jacksonville, when you used to go to Detroit or Oakland or anywhere like that, or honestly, the biggest quarterback graveyard of them all, Cleveland, your career was probably going to die.
Right.
Like my buddy Michael and I were talking about it one day. Look at Brady Quinn. Brady Quinn was great in college. Where did he go to? Cleveland. Where, unfortunately, did Brady Quinn end up not shortly too long after? Out of the NFL. But I think he would have made a great NFL quarterback had he not been in Cleveland.
See, probably, because Notre Dame is another one of those powerhouse schools that just always seems to have NFL guys, especially on the O-line in particular. They always seem to have NFL guys. Yeah, what you want coming out of college is you want to see a quarterback overcome adversity. Yes. This was why Josh Allen was so touted, because he was overcoming a bad O-line in Wyoming. Brock Purdy, I keep bringing him up because people don't actually realize how good this kid is. He went to Iowa State. Yeah. When have you ever heard of Iowa State being top anything in college football? And he brings them up to damn near the national championship game. Iowa State. Now, he had Breece Hall as a running back, but they were number 6 in the nation and legit. Like, they were putting it on people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember that year because, I mean, Matt Campbell, their head coach, he's done wonders with Iowa State. Right. In all honesty, I kind of root for Iowa State because I have an old sergeant that I used to work with in the military that is a huge Hawkeyes fan. So I'm like, God, if Iowa State can win, if they can win that Cy Hawks trophy, God, it just makes it that much sweeter.
Like, you look at these guys who, like Jared Goff, Cal was number 6 it's higher than that. They were like number 3. He brought Cal. When did Cal ever had a quarterback that was bringing them up to number 3. They had Aaron Rodgers, and then you have to go back to when the band was running onto the field at the Stanford game. That's the last time Cal was relevant until Jared Goff got there. And then they went to Texas and won. They went to they keep beating this team. Auburn. They went to Auburn and beat them. Like that's an SEC team that was really good at the time. That is what you want to see in a quarterback. That's what you want to see in a quarterback. Now, CJ Stroud, when he was playing at Ohio State, CJ had to overcome some stuff. I don't know if you remember that last senior season. He had to overcome an Ohio State team that was kind of, they were going through some adversities. They didn't really have they had one great receiver. The whole line was kind of, And now look at him in the league. He's used to having that pressure. So I think you're right, because Tua didn't have to overcome anything. But I mean, he got injured. But other than that, like, he had the best team in the nation every year.
For years,
Jalen, same thing.
So John brought up another question. So who has overcome more, Drake May or Jaden Daniels? If that's the case, why is Jaden Daniels higher than Drake? Drake had a terrible O-line.
I think Daniels had to overcome more.
I think so. And this is just me kind of being personally biased against Daniels, but this is also me. I don't really know a lot about Drake May. I've heard a lot of hype about him. My biggest takeaway with Drake May is I've heard all of this hype, but I have seen 0 results. And I'm not saying those results have to be a national title. I'm not saying it has to be a national title appearance. I'm saying at least be competitive enough that you're in competition for your own conference title, which
in a weaker conference too. Like, Jaden Daniels has to play against NFL guys in the SEC every single week.
And Jaden took them to the SEC West title, took them into the SEC West. They had to face Georgia, who ended up going on to win the national title again, got the snot beat out of them on the way there. But it's like, to me, Drake May, I've heard a lot of people say that he, elevated UNC, which he probably did. He's probably one of the best quarterbacks UNC has had for quite a while.
Sure.
But I mean,
But what is that saying, really? I mean,
he's, like I said, doesn't have to be a national title appearance. I wanted him to be slightly more competitive. Like, I didn't really just see UNC doing that, to be honest with you.
Now, as far as the second part of that question, why is he ranked higher? This happens every single year once we get towards draft time and NFL combine time and all this stuff. People start making up reasons for why the number one guy might not necessarily be the number one guy. And they kind of play quarterback musical chairs. They forget what happened in the season on the field, which is what matters. And they forget that Penix was putting it on him and had to fight for every yard and had to overcome Michigan's, just their defense was incredible. They forget that Bo Nix went toe-to-toe with Penix, who probably had the top team in the nation. They had track stars all over the field too. And they start going, well, Drake May had this many yards in this game against this team and all this stuff just to boost it up so that they can go higher in the draft. Maybe it's an agent thing. Maybe it's a politics thing. I don't know. But just look at the field and who did what on the field. And it doesn't make any sense that the Heisman Trophy winner is ranked lower than somebody who's in a weaker conference. It makes no sense.
Well, and I'll say this too, and John brings it up. He says, good point, because I don't have Caleb Williams, the number one. I'm an Oregon fan, and we made him look terrible. He had 7 good games. Other than that, that was it. And Jonathan and I have both talked about that. I don't see Caleb Williams as the number one because of this past year. He didn't really overcome adversity at all. He took a pretty major loss to Notre Dame, and then after that, he statistically stayed on point, but I don't think psychologically or mentally he bounced back from it at all. They barely beat Cal this year. And other than that, he lost basically every other game. So I also think that when it comes to the draft, the media and these guys kind of search for this, next quarterback, this next great guy, which is what I think happened with Zach Wilson. For whatever reason, once Zach Wilson was picked, who I don't think he was on anybody's draft board other than the Jets, when he got drafted number 2, they're like, oh, look at this guy. I'm like, no. You are reaching for a guy because you have, three other actually solid college quarterbacks who in college had some type of success in Trevor Lawrence, Mac Jones, and Justin Fields.
Right.
The two biggest reaches were Zach Wilson and Trey Lance because, the potential is there. Not a lot of people are going to expect them. They're going to be a surprise. Okay, you're right. They could be a surprise, but they could also be what they ended up being, and that's busts.
Yeah, I think Caleb Williams is probably. I got Penix first, despite his injury history. I got Bo Nix after that. Jaden Daniels, yes, he had to overcome some more, but I just don't see the quarterback traits that I like to see. It's in college, you can get away with that scramble stuff, but in the NFL, you really can't. You can't get away with that. Justin Fields. The one exception has been Lamar. And I think just because of his exceptional skill set, he's been able to get as far as he has. But he's another guy. Doesn't even have as many wins in the playoffs as Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant. Like, Dak Prescott is another one of those guys where you on paper, it's like, okay, they got what you need, but they just don't show the quarterback traits enough to say, okay, we're going to bet the franchise on this guy. I think Penix does. I don't even think J.J. McCarthy does.
No,
I don't understand why he's on the board. Caleb, you feel like he should have the traits because on the field, he's magical. He has to overcome awful offensive line and terrible defense, but he just doesn't have the mental strength, it seems, from what I'm watching. He doesn't have the mental toughness to bounce back from really bad situations. It just seems that way. And in the NFL, when you go to a bad team, you got to be mentally strong because you're going to lose a lot of games in the beginning. They've earned that number one spot, as Peyton Manning famously said. And so you need guys who can kind of put the team on their back and say, guys, we got this. We might not get it this year, but let's keep growing. Let's keep going. And Caleb doesn't seem to have that part of his skill set. He's magical on the field. I think the mystique of Patrick Mahomes has caused us to prop somebody up who doesn't necessarily deserve it.
Yeah. Now, I do, because again, I'm an LSU fan, so I'm going to be a tiny bit biased in Jaden's defense. I'm going to read you some of his stats from this past season as far as when you said he doesn't have the traits. And I can kind of see what you're saying as far as, he does like to run it. He had 135 carries for 1,100 yards and 10 rushing touchdowns. Now, the passing side, though, this is where I say he does have the traits. He threw for 3,800 yards. He had 40 touchdowns. He had 4 interceptions. He had 2 wide receivers. He had Malik Neighbors, who's expected to go in the first round, had over 1,500 yards, 14 touchdowns. And he had Brian Thomas Jr., who had just under 1,200 yards and 17 touchdowns.
What was the first stat that you read again?
The rushing one, where he ran for 1,100 yards.
Tell me what NFL quarterback has ever won the Super Bowl or any championship game rushing for that many yards.
None, but
0.
This
is all I'm saying, Tony. Don't overthink the room.
Oh no.
But a third of his production is on the ground. That's bad in the NFL.
A third, but this is where I would say I would give him more credit than I would Lamar, is because he threw for 40 touchdowns and 4 picks. That's not, you do that in the NFL, that's pretty damn good.
But he's not going to do that in the NFL because he ran for 1,100 yards.
He did. I'm just saying, to me, there's more passing potential with him than there is with Lamar.
I'll give you that, but this one's not hard to see. You've seen this prototype of quarterback go into the NFL, and all of them have struggled. Lamar Jackson's coach is a Super Bowl winning coach. They have not sniffed the Super Bowl since he got there.
Very true.
Not only have they not sniffed the Super Bowl since he got there, they have some epic losses, some blowout home losses as a number 1 seed.
Yeah. Now
this prototype of football player, and again, I'm not trying to say that Jaden Daniels is a bad player. I'm just saying that prototype of player for what's required in the NFL from that position, when a third or a fourth of your production is on the ground as at the quarterback position, you're going to fail. You are going to fail unless you completely change your game where you don't run at all, hardly at all. That's the only way it's going to work, because in the NFL, the defensive guys are way faster than they are in the SEC even. Yeah. The linebackers are all the top of the game. The D linemen are bigger and faster, and it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So Jayden Daniels is going to have to become a passer, pure passer, and then scramble when he needs to, versus a third of his production coming on the ground. That means every 3 dropbacks, Tony, he's looking to run. Yeah. That's not going to get it done in the NFL.
Now, I will say for him, I do think he's going to have a rough, kind of a rough NFL career, because the team that is projected to take Jayden is New England. And fortunately, New England has a good defense. Their offensive line is crappy. They really don't have any weapons. Now, that might be different with Gerard Mayo at the head coach now instead of Bill Belichick, but still.
They're in a rebuild. It's going to take 3 to 5 years for them.
Yeah, it's going to take a while. And
they're getting rid of everybody.
And honestly, I don't blame them. I do not blame them.
Well, they have to. New England has to, because right now Bill Belichick's fingers are all over it. If he's out, this new coach has to have his philosophy installed in New England. And you just don't typically do that with success for coaches that are not all-time greats. The Jim Harbaughs, Andy Reids, the Shanahans, the McVays, LaFleur, those guys. Stefanski is another one. If you're not one of those guys, and I don't know enough about this New England guy to say he is or isn't, but if you're not one of those guys that can instantly come in and change the temperature in the room, it takes 3 to 5 years to really get a team into a coach's philosophy.
Yeah. And we'll finish it out with last question from John. So why do you think there's so much hate for Bo Nix? He's very accurate and runs second if it isn't there. I mean, I personally don't hate Bo Nix.
I haven't seen any hate from Bo Nix. I really haven't.
I've seen it more in the fact of people argued a lot that he didn't deserve to be, I guess, in the Heisman running, even though statistically he had his best year this last year at Oregon. He went 12-2, 4,500 passing yards, 45 passing touchdowns, only 3 picks. And he got better from when he started out at Auburn. I mean, his best season was his freshman year. They went 9-4. He was 16-6 in touchdowns to interceptions. They took a step back in 2020 and 2021. He went 6-5, 6-4. He wasn't able to play. Go ahead.
Can I answer that question? And I actually, it kind of came to me as you were reading the stats. Mm-hmm. We got to put Oregon in the same boat that we put Ohio State and Alabama. And this is one of the reasons why I don't think Justin Herbert's the guy. Because think of all the Oregon quarterbacks that have come into the league. How have they done? Ever.
You say your probably biggest name would be Mariota, at least of recent.
How did he do?
Oh yeah, he did not do well at all.
And so we have to have an honest conversation about these guys, because Bo Nix started at Auburn, left, went to Oregon. He's got a track team as a team, and in the Pac-12, even though they were probably the best division or conference in the NCAA, or at least the most entertaining. Like, those games were fantastic this past year. But in the Pac-12, it's about speed rather than scheme. Whoever had the fastest players, whoever had the fastest offense or defense won the games typically. Bo Nix going into Oregon, I can see why people are a little bit hesitant, because you've got track stars as your teammates. And if we really think about, if we have an honest conversation about every Oregon quarterback that has come out in recent history and gone into the NFL, they've all failed. Every single one of them. We have Mariota, we have Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert has 1 playoff appearance.
And it was a bad loss.
Years? How many years has he been in the league? I don't even know anymore.
5, he was 6? Drafted. No, because he was drafted, I think, 2021. Let me make sure. Oh, 2020 was when he got drafted.
So this is now his 4th year in the league? right?
Yep.
5th year.
Fourth. I think fourth coming into fifth.
And 1 playoff appearance. And you had a 24-7 lead or something like it was. It was a game where people turned it off. Your lead was so high, and they come back onto Sports Center and they find out you lost that game to another quarterback who's not that great. If we're really being honest, and Trevor Lawrence, if we're really being honest, I mean, he's not good. He hasn't really shown.
Come on, man. Nick Wright said he was the prince that was promised. He was supposed to be the next Peyton Manning.
I'll put it to you this way, Tony. I went to the 49ers Jaguars game when they came out here.
Mm-hmm.
The Jacksonville crowd left in the middle of the 3rd quarter.
That's
the
surprising.
3rd quarter.
Yeah. Now, I will say, and this isn't really much of a defense for Trevor, but I've heard a lot of people argue, well, his rookie year doesn't count because he had Urban Meyer as a head coach. That year was awful. And I'm like,
we'll give him that.
You still played a lot of those NFL games, though. Like, again, not saying you can overcome every bad thing, but you can overcome a lot. You had Doug Peterson your second year. You go into the playoffs. Yeah, you lose to Kansas City, but that was to kind of be expected. Right. This year, though, they started out hot.
Mm-hmm.
And then they just dropped completely.
And then they played the 49ers, and it was over after that.
Yeah.
And this is Trevor Lawrence, Deshaun Watson. We can kind of put those 2 quarterbacks in the same boat of we have a track team as a team in college. We win the national championship, and people tout us like we're the best thing since sliced bread coming into the NFL. But we really didn't show the traits of a quarterback that really knows how to dissect and read NFL level defenses with these NFL scheming defensive coordinators who live and breathe defense. And you're not showing the skill set to be able to recognize hidden zones. Like there was a video where Tom Brady, and I know he's the greatest of all time to ever do it, but this is the level that you have to be at in the NFL. He's hiking the ball, and he's telling somebody the coverage as he's handing off the ball.
Yeah.
Like that's the level of dissection that you kind of need to be at if you're going to be successful and win Super Bowls in the playoffs. And those guys really have never shown that level of dissecting defenses. It's always been like in Trevor Lawrence's situation, he's trusting his arm. He's got a big arm, and he's trusting the guys just running down the field. Same with, take your pick of all these guys coming out of these powerhouse schools. And this is what we have now. We have a Justin Herbert who's got all these stats and 1 playoff victory or 1 playoff appearance.
Yeah. The only one I will kind of defend, even though I don't like him as a person, is Deshaun, in the fact of he did show in 2 seasons, his second year and his third year, he went 11-5 and 10-5 and took Houston to the playoff both times. Now, albeit in 2018, when he first took him there, he lost. And then in 2019, he went 1-1.
Didn't he have a big lead in one of those playoff games and blew it?
If I had to bet, I would say it was probably this 2020 season. Yeah, they lost 38-41 to the Titans. Oh no, that's his final game. My bad. That was totally wrong. Oh, that was the season. Let me go back.
While you're doing that, we keep running into the quarterback situation, and every year, the media has to hype somebody up. This is not difficult to predict, you guys. College quarterbacks that run primarily or have freak track athletes as wide receivers don't do well, because in the NFL, everybody's an athlete. In the NFL, everybody can run. So you're not surprising people with your speed, which means you have to be a smarter level thinker at quarterback position. I'm not trying to say the guys are dumb. It just takes a different skill set to be able to play quarterback with success at the NFL level. Now, will you blow up fantasy numbers and all that stuff with those kinds of skill sets? Sure. I will absolutely draft Justin Fields on my fantasy team and Lamar and Caleb. But if I'm trying to actually win a Super Bowl, those Deshaun Watson guys don't make my roster because they can't process fast enough when
Right.
somebody blitzes off the edge.
Right. Oh yeah, and the game that he lost was they lost 31-51 to Kansas City when they were
To the
up.
Chiefs.
I think it was like 28-0 at one point.
And Patrick Mahomes, for his whole career, has been a dissecting guy. It took him a little bit longer to do the NFL dissect thing because in college he never had to do that at Texas Tech. They don't have these big defenses, but he got a coach that helped him develop that and said get some pudding and stop running, and this is what the defense is giving you.
Hey, he had the very highly touted Cliff Kingsbury as his head coach at Texas Tech.
Yeah.
But it's been fun, man. Even though you had to sit through the first part talking about your Niners, it's been fun as always, man. Again, let people know where they can follow you.
I'm on X. Millertime JK is where I talk sports. I'm on Instagram at I am Jonathan K for music, and then here you can find me here. Today was that first part was tough. I just remember when Patrick Mahomes scored that touchdown, I just laid on my back in my living room, just staring up at the ceiling, listening to them talk about how great the Chiefs were, and I was just like, 16 seconds.
That's why I didn't text you. I was like, man, I already know the pain this dude's probably going through. Like, I'm just gonna leave that one alone. But hey, we can relish in the fact that Taylor Swift is a Super Bowl champion, and we can all go to bed tonight sleeping so happily with that thought.
I don't know why the Taylor Swift thing makes people so upset. I think it's a great relationship. It gives us another story. It's introducing the NFL to people who didn't necessarily care about it. So I know the NFL loves it. Their ratings have gone through the roof since she started dating Travis.
You want to know what I really think it is? I don't think it's people hate Taylor. I think it's mostly like anything. Like, I don't think a lot of people truly hate the Chiefs team. They hate the fans of their team. Just the same as, like, I don't think people really hate Taylor. They hate Swifties. No, there's a lot of people, they truly just hate the Cowboys, and they hate Cowboys fans more on top of it.
This year, the Cowboys aren't helping themselves this offseason. Did you hear what Micah was saying the issue was with the defense? Mm-hmm. He came back from vacation and just started talking wild. Like, I don't call these plays. I was like, Micah, you were on the thing for Defensive Player of the Year. 1 tackle in the playoffs against the Packers? 1 tackle? Come on, bro.
Well, and it was funny. There's a couple of people pointed that out, guys need to focus more. They need to stop doing a lot of this, recreational stuff. They need to lock in more. And somebody was like, so you going to stop doing the podcast that you're doing then? Because that's extra, like, unneeded stuff that you're doing, or nah?
That's really the difference between the good organizations and the ones that are show. It goes from the top down. Again, don't outthink the room. Every week, Jerry Jones is talking about his team. Every week. He just can't let go and let a GM come in there and be a GM. He just can't do it. And that trickles down. Then you get CeeDee Lamb and Micah Parsons and all these people talking. See, Micah Parsons had the nerve to say, that's why Cleveland is still Cleveland. To David Njoku. I'm sorry. Cleveland went on the road and lost. Y'all got blown out at home to a team that wasn't even supposed to be there. You're the last person that should be talking about that's why this team is this team. And you guys haven't. Cleveland is overachieving. Dallas is underachieving. Supremely underachieving. And Dallas, man, that's why people hate Dallas, is because they think they're better than they actually are, like the players do.
Oh, yeah. No, I agree. Believe me, if there is one thing Jerry Jones is, Man is a businessman. I swear he could go to Alaska. He could sell a snowball to an Eskimo. I swear to God, he could do it. He could make that snowball out to be the greatest thing on the planet, and that Eskimo would probably buy
On
it from
that
Jerry
we
Jones.
agree. He will get you
Like,
talking about his stuff. He will get you talking about his team. He'll get you paying for whatever.
if you ever need it, honestly, if you ever needed a hype man to build your brand, Jerry Jones
The
is the
first
dude.
call.
Jerry Jones is the guy. But man, it's been fun as always. Like I said, we'll probably take a little bit of a break from the show. We'll probably hop on again when free agency starts to kick off again. I kind of want to know, where does Russell Wilson go? If he goes anywhere, does he retire? Does he have to get traded? What happens there? Obviously, we talked about Justin Fields, so there will be a lot that happens. There, we may see guys in other uniforms and whatnot. It's still early in the off season, but we won't really find out until, I think it's either beginning or middle of March when free agency officially happens. It's like right before the draft. But
it's going to be interesting to see.
It is. But it's been fun, man. Appreciate it. Again, thank you for everybody who's watched. Appreciate everybody in the comments who, had a conversation with us. Always appreciate it. Always love you guys. Again, you can always find us here at Inside the Hoosier Mind on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. On X, it's Ian Hoosier Mind. But again, thanks, Jonathan. Appreciate you taking your lumps, man. Having to deal with what you had to deal with, but appreciate you coming on as always, buddy.
Hey, if you're gonna make bold predictions, if they don't go your way, you gotta face it. You gotta face it. So I'm not running from anything.
At least everybody can say, hey, he showed up, he took his lumps. So I appreciate it at least.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Tony.
But all right, guys, everybody have a good night, and we will see y'all later.